It starts as a handshake, but then it almost becomes an arm wrestle. What's going on? Darren, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Hope you're well.
Yeah, not bad.
It's all about power and the perception of power. I mean, if we go back to when Trump was first inaugurated, the first time around, the first thing he did was effectively summon all the world leaders, and then we had a series of the different, what we call bone crusher handshakes. So this is a tactic that Trump uses to determine how pliable people are going to be. One of the few politicians that was indeed briefed on this the first time around was Macron. So we ended up seeing the two men, as I said, having this effective tug of war on the White House steps. So it's all to do with power. So in one of the clips, both men end up putting a hand on each other's shoulder.
Yes.
And this is, again, all about power and the assertion of power and also the perception, the optics of it.
What about, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, it starts with Trump. They're both facing the cameras. Trump moves his right hand over and sort of grabs Macron's left knee and gives a sort of playful squeeze, where Macron then responds by putting his hand over there. What's going on there?
Well, there's actually a little bit more going on there than meets the eye because, I mean, Trump is a very tactile man. He's sort of always kind of hugging people. Now, what was happening really was Macron was talking about the investment, and they've invested 60% or whatever. But then when Trump begins to talk and say, well, the US aren't going to get their money back, Macron puts his hand over, as you say, onto his knee, onto his arm. But what that actually is really is the non-verbal equivalent of saying, shut up, I'm speaking. So and then what happens is, as Macron continues to speak, one of the things I look for is a thing called a micro expression, and that's a very fleeting flash of the real emotion that someone's feeling. And what Trump actually is conveying is contempt. He's not happy the fact that Macron spoke over him. And we see this sort of, it's what we call a bilateral smile in psychology. So it's a one-sided smile. And Trump tends to make this quite a lot when he's not happy.
Do you think they're fully aware of what they're doing? Is some of this subconscious and they don't actually realise they're playing out in front of a bevy of cameras?
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I mean, I've assessed, a lot of major politicians for a long time, and even
you need to get out more. You really need to get out more, Darren.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. So essentially, no matter how well trained somebody is,
Right.
they cannot not communicate and what we call leak this information.
Darren, enjoyed our conversation. Thank you. Darren Stanton, body language expert, also known as TV's human lie detector. It's available if you've not seen it. I saw it last night on one of the news bulletins and straight away phoned into what's laughingly known as the journalist who's employed here and said, we have got to be all over that. These are remarkable scenes. And of course, how will it be between the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer? Will that be lots of knee hugs and power plays? As I said earlier, world leaders past and present were out and about yesterday. I spoke with Boris Johnson while he was in Kyiv. Meanwhile, a summit, fairly extraordinary at times, took place between Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron, where at one point they seemed to be holding hands quite determinedly. LBC's political editor was watching and now gives us a full debrief. Natasha Clark, good morning.
Morning, Nick. Yes, that Macron-Trump bromance totally back on, isn't it? It was an amazing Oval Office conference and press conference to watch.
Vive la différence.
Yes, exactly. They laughed, they smiled, they were slapping each other's backs, they were touching each other's arms. There was another really long handshake, you'll remember a couple of years ago. I think it was something like 20 seconds. They had once held hands and there was even a wink from Macron as he sort of went out into this. It's kind of not really clear whether they're best friends or enemies or what on earth it is. And Macron's playing this sort of Trump whisperer role at the moment, isn't he? Trying to act like his best mate, trying to get him to see sense on Ukraine, but also stand up to him at the same time. And it's very clear that obviously they've known each other quite a long time. He's quite comfortable in his presence. He's quite comfortable calling him out. They both obviously have a lot of respect for each other. One person in one newspaper today has called Macron the Joker in a pack of peace cards, which I quite liked. I thought that sort of sums it up quite well. But he is the first European leader to be visiting Trump in the White House, and this is all part of a week of diplomacy. And Starmer's obviously going later this week, so you've got this kind of good cop, bad cop, I think, act that these two world leaders. But while they've got a lot of chumminess in sort of person, there were quite a lot of stark political differences in their positions. They're still oceans apart in terms of the actual policy. Macron not afraid to call him out, and he used an interview with Fox News and that press conference to push Donald Trump on why they needed a security guarantee from the US for Ukraine to stop Putin returning, and how Europe is prepared to step up with a peacekeeping force.
not to go to the front line, not to go in confrontation, but to be, in some locations, being defined by the treaty, as a presence to maintain this peace and our collective credibility with the US backup and a US backstop.
And there was this rather tense moment too where Macron corrected Donald Trump on the amount that Europe has been spent on defence spending.
Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid. We paid 60% of the total effort. And it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money, to be clear.
So the warm-up act for Keir Starmer. And did you see the way that he sort of put his hand on his knee? And look, I think this is all a quite good thing for Keir Starmer to be flying out into this. You've got Macron. He clearly knows Trump. He clearly knows him well. He's got a lot of experience dealing with him and sort of standing up to him, despite the fact he's a good sort of 6 inches smaller than him. And makes it look quite easy. And I think for Keir Starmer, he's going to find this all quite difficult because this is the first time he's going to be on the world stage at a press conference, standing next to Donald Trump. And anything could really happen later this week when this sort of diplomatic dance on the world stage takes place. But I think Macron has left Keir Starmer in quite a good place for that.
Noting that we've got to get to the headlines, just a quick sentence. Boris Johnson giving a series of interviews, including obviously mine, this morning. Did we learn anything? 3%, I suppose, is interesting. And the size of the army, the peacekeeping force from Britain.
Yeah, definitely. 10,000 troops could potentially
We got
be. Well, we don't have them. Where on earth is he getting them from? But, classic Boris Johnson, isn't it? All of that, gymnastics of trying to say what he thinks about Donald Trump without actually criticising Donald Trump is actually quite impressive as it is chaotic. Calling out Donald Trump's dictator comments as absolute lies and saying that his comments about Zelensky being a dictator were painful to hear. I think that's actually really goes to the heart of how difficult European leaders are going to find Donald Trump to deal with because they want to call him out. Behind the scenes, people are saying what he is saying is absolutely crazy. But in person, on the record, they just can't bring themselves to do it.